will be sent from Los Angeles. It's being administered by the U.S. Olympic Committee. Won't be available for a few days. The banned substances list is huge, but again, there is no test which would tell us whether any runner in the race had ever used the technique of blood doping. And right now, we want to talk to you about Fred LeBeau, longtime director of the race, president of the New York City Marathon, or New York City Roadrunners Club, who is one of the most visible figures in all of road running. We asked Fred LeBeau before this race why drug testing was being implemented this year for the first time at the New York City Marathon.
Years ago, when all the runners received just a trophy for winning a race, the incentive wasn't there to drug test, unless to go into drugs. But our concern is that with this amount of money at stake, it's literally millions of dollars, because once you win the New York City Marathon, it's not only the money you receive for winning, it's the endorsement possibilities. Your contracts with your shoe companies and other marathons to participate in increases. That's why we feel it's important we drug test.
There's a moral obligation, in your opinion, to the fans and those people who back it.
We have a moral obligation to the runners who don't use drugs, to the fans, to the media, and to ourselves. And not to be cheated by someone who performs through synthetic stimulants.
Well, it certainly appears at this moment as though Johnny Poli will be one of those tested, because Larry Rawson, if you can hear me, he looks like he's made his move.
Hear you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Poli is moving smartly. He's up in the balls of his feet still. He's running very comfortably. We are now running, however, into a very substantial headwind. And I am noticing the gulf between Poli and De Castella is about 100 yards back, and I'm telling you, the Deke is struggling back there a bit. Unless Poli folds, I'd be surprised if De Castella could come back on him. Poli looks fresh. I'm amazed at how fresh he looks. The pace is right on 2:08, 2:09 for the total marathon time. He's run only 2 miles so far of the first 20 miles, slower than 5 minutes per mile. Every mile has been under 5 minutes per mile. He continues to look over his shoulder and check back into where De Castella is. I've seen him look back about 5 times in the last half mile just to check him. The air is cool right now. At one point, half the sky was blue, yet the sun never really reflected down on these athletes. The thing they're going to struggle with here now is the hills that Marty mentioned in Central Park. I don't think the race is over yet, but also the wind that they're going to have to face naked, so to speak. They won't have any trees to help block that wind for the next 4 miles. So I think this is going to be a fascinating finish that we have coming up. Holy...
Thanks very much, Larry. As you look at Rob De Castella, Marty, he is no stranger to winning big marathons, but he's no stranger to losing them either. What goes through his mind at this point?
I think he's got to be thinking back to 1983 in Canberra, where he was farther behind than this, and he managed to win the race. He has done it before, and he's got to be thinking about the positive instances in his life when he was able to come down. He has a lot at stake. There's not a big pack behind him. First place is the only thing that he's thinking about, because he can afford to give it everything and go after first place. If with 2 or 3 miles to go he really starts to collapse, he'll still be able to hang on to second or third place. But he really looks like he's laboring now on this slightest upgrade. And of course the question going into the race, even in his mind, was, is 3 major marathons within 9 months too much? And right now, if we were sitting next to him, as Larry is, and we asked him, you'd have to say it was. It's too late in the race, really, for him to have a bad patch and really come back. He's got to start thinking, perhaps, at the people behind him, Hussein and also Pizzolato, who, when the going got really tough, backed off a bit and may have saved something for a late rush in the park.
If you've ever done any distance running at all, you know that when you begin to get tired, you can feel the muscles in your face involuntarily tighten up and begin to get strictures. If we were to look at Rob De Castella's face from much earlier in the race, when he looked good, and compare it to what we saw there, I think he would have looked like he'd aged about 8 years.
Well, it's not only a physical thing now. He knows that this is big trouble to be this far behind. And he can see, as Larry said, Johnny Poli not only is opening up a lead, not only has run well all day, but he looks so marvelous that it's got to worry you. Just his looks will put you in the tank.
They are in the South Bronx, and very shortly they will turn back downtown and come back toward Manhattan. And right now, you can see the huge gap that Johnny Poli has suddenly opened up just within the last mile and a half over Rob DiCostello. That aerial shot of Poli as he turns onto 5th Avenue at 138th Street, back in Manhattan, ready to make the final approach towards Central Park, which is where this race is won or lost. Status quo in the men's race of the New York City Marathon. The leader, Johnny Poli of Italy, into Manhattan. With him, Larry Rawson. Larry?
Jim, this race is not over yet. It's a soap opera out here. It looks to me like DiCostello looks a little better out there. The stride is stronger. He has closed down the gap on Poli by about 15 yards in the last mile. Going into the win, they're running the miles now in 5:07 to 5:13. And I tell you, Deke still looks good, so don't go away from your television sets.
The cheeks are puffing, though, as DiCostello chases Johnny Poli. Meanwhile, Greta Weitz looks about the same as she did on 4th Avenue in Brooklyn, now with a commanding lead in the women's race. Diana Nyad?
Yeah, Jim, I'll tell you something about the crowds. When the lead woman goes by, as Greta's now coming up 1st Avenue at about 116th Street here, they all point. They throw flowers. They get all excited as if this is a symbolic passing here of the first woman of the race. I have completely lost visual contact with Laura Fogley. I can only assume that she is so far back that unless Greta has some enormous unforeseen problem, she is on her way to her 8th victory in the New York Marathon.
And each year she learns a little bit more about what victory in the New York City Marathon means. Greta Weitz, once a shy schoolgirl from Norway, now an industry in and of herself with a book, a videotape, various other commercial running involvements, Catherine.
And well-deserved with all that experience. We can learn a lot from her. We were talking earlier about facial expressions. Let's look at Greta's face here. It is totally serene. Jack Weitz, her husband, has been telling me that Greta keeps at peace because she doesn't worry about times. She worries only about winning, and she makes that decision at the moment of the race. Greta's been running here with some of the top Masters runners in the world, most notably Dirk van Satten from the Netherlands, number 41. And behind Greta, now Diana can't see her, but Laura Foley from Italy is 35 seconds behind her, and 35 seconds behind Laura is Lisa Martin. Other outstanding women in the race we should quickly mention behind them are Françoise Villeton and Odette Lapierre from France and Canada, respectively. They're also running very, very good races. And we're projecting at this point about a 2:27 finish for Greta. She's picking up the pace a little bit and looking great.
And I mentioned the self-contained industry with Greta Weitz is involved in. I asked her a little bit earlier if it is easier now to handle the public relations responsibilities of her role.
To tell you the truth, I must admit that it doesn't come natural, and I do it because I know that it's something that I have to do, but I feel most comfortable when I'm with friends and family and not a public person.
And someday that will be precisely what you do.
That would be exactly what I want to do.
She has written in her book that sometimes her friends are surprised to learn that she cooks and sews and washes clothes, just like most wives do in marriages such as hers and Jack's all around the world.
But also she's joined the Norwegian Olympic Committee and works in a health clinic in preventative medicine. So that's very outstanding for her, too.
And there is Johnny Poli, who still holds the lead in the men's race. And hard to tell from this perspective, Marty Liquori, what's happening to DiCostello, but how does Poli look to you?
He's about 12 seconds ahead of DiCostello, so it's about 78 yards. The race isn't over. One thing to point out is Rob DiCostello is an Australian, but he lives half of the year in Boulder, Colorado. He's been there for the last 6 months during our summer, so he's very good at hills. He has to be to run there. When they get into the park, the hills are going to be a factor.
The hills look gentle as you ride around Central Park in a cab. They are not so gentle if you run around the park drive, as so many runners do. In fact, there are probably literally thousands of runners in this race who practice for the race by running on those hills in Central Park. Rob DiCostello, on the other hand, has only seen this course briefly. He ran the last 10 miles of the course about 4 or 5 days ago to get a feel for it, so he is not a total stranger to the hills of Central Park. You can barely see DiCostello behind the police car. There he is, in the middle of your screen, just to the left center. Rob DiCostello pounding along in second place. Favored to win here today favored to win the 1984 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. He lost there. He may be surprised to find himself behind Johnny Poli at this stage of this race.
Johnny Poli just ran a 5:13 miles, so he's slowing down, but Di Costello didn't make up any on that because he was 2 seconds slower per mile, so it's going to be a race of attrition, much as the last two New York City, well, the last three with Rod Dixon. It's not who can run the fastest at the end, it's who can slow up the least.
All right, Johnny Poli of Italy making his way toward Central Park. Rob Di Costello hoping to stay with him.
ABC Sports' exclusive coverage of the New York City Marathon continues. Once again, Jim Lampley.
And there is an aerial look of the world's second largest urban public park, Central Park, about twice the size of the Principality of Monaco, which has been the major proving ground in the New York City Marathon ever since we at ABC Sports first began televising the race in 1981. Here is a major step forward for Johnny Poli as he has just moved into the park. A palpably different atmosphere now for the runners. No longer on city streets, but rather on the lovely tree-lined Park Drive. And you can see very graphically there, Poli passes under the 23-mile mark. He has 3 miles, 385 yards to go. Whether he is surprised by it or not, he still maintains a substantial lead over Rob Di Costello of Australia, regarded as the #1 marathoner in the world, regarded as the favorite to win this race. Quickly, Larry Rawson, a comment.
Jim, this race in no ways is over with, although Poli still looks excellent. Di Costello is a strength runner. He hopes that he can gain on the hills here in Central Park. Also, looming behind Di Costello within striking range, should Poli run into trouble, is Ibrahim Hussein and the legendary Orlando Pizzolato. As he goes after in quest, the Italian record holder Gianni Poli in the lead. The distance about 100 yards. It looks to me in the last half mile that Di Costello may have lost about 20 yards. This is an interesting finish. We have less now than 3 miles to go.
And if Di Costello can pull it off, he would not be the first runner to come from behind dramatically to win the New York City Marathon in Central Park. The race has been blessed with close finishes in recent years, most of them in this area.
In 1981, Central Park brought a Cuban boy by way of Oregon to the top of the marathon heat. Alberto Salazar broke a 12-year-old world best time in ideal conditions, then waited at the finish line to congratulate women's champion Allison Rowe, who duplicated Salazar's feat with a world best of her own. A year later, Salazar was pressed to the limit in the race's closest finish. He turned toward the 26-mile mark, shoulder to shoulder with Rodolfo Gomez, then sprinted away from the Mexican for his third and most difficult New York victory. It was, to this point, Salazar's last appearance here. Two new faces were at the center of the drama in 1983. Longtime New Zealander middle-distance star Rod Dixon had recently turned to the marathon, but through the park, he was chasing lesser-known British runner Jeff Smith. Smith's agony was graphic, and so was Dixon's exultation at the finish. 1984 was a day of oppressive heat and humidity, and the race was a slow grind. Toughest in the park was the obscure Italian Orlando Pizzolato. First to finish, but thoroughly drained. Last year, Pizzolato started slowly, and for a while was nowhere in sight behind Djibouti's Ahmed Saleh. But on the Park Drive, the Italian fighter crept up behind Saleh and soon dropped him to the bitter consolation of second place. Orlando Pizzolato taught Ahmed Saleh the lesson of Salazar Gomez and Dixon Smith, that you run in 5 boroughs, but you win in Central Park.
Well, not much to say now. The drama is manifest. You have met Johnny Poli of Italy. Marty Liquori has told you his credentials. There's his last mile time, which is very slow. 23-mile split time, slowing down. Projected winning time, rapidly getting slower. Di Costello not moving up the challenge on his shoulder.
Well, here's what happened. Poli ran a 5:13, but Di Costello ran 2 seconds slower. Then Poli ran a 5:18, but Di Costello ran 4 seconds slower. So Di is not coming back on Poli, but you know what? Pizzolato has moved into third.
Orlando Pizzolato, perhaps providing some more of the kind of heroics for which he has become known, particularly last year, but also the year before. There are the standings of the top men. Hussein in 4th place. Nimchak now moving up into 5th place. Ralph Saltzman in 6th place. The leader by a comfortable margin now with less than 3 miles to go, Johnny Poli of Italy.
And we should point out that Pizzolato would love to win this race, but there's a particular feeling between he and Poli. Pizzolato is kind of the Rodney Dangerfield of marathon. He won here twice, but everyone says he can only run in the heat. He backed into the wind. Certainly in the first year, stopping 8 times, he backed into the wind. Last year, he was either a genius or a numbskull, but he managed to charge at the end of the race. But Poli holds the Italian record, and so Pizzolato feels that he doesn't get any respect in Italy because of Poli. So for Poli to win this is the worst thing that Orlando would like to see.
And there is the leader, Greta Weitz, in the women's race, who has not been challenged for quite some time now, Catherine Switzer. We're going to get a word from Diana Nyad in a moment, but Greta really pulled away on the 59th Street Bridge, and it's been no contest since then.
That's right. She keeps getting faster and faster. She's on a 2:26:30 pace. She has an expression, I want to go in a hurry slowly, so she's keeping moving out like this. Foley is still in the race, but 58 seconds behind, and Martin is still in the race. And it's interesting. People have criticized the New York City Marathon women's race for not being competitive. But what could be more competitive now than Greta Weitz, who goes out and annihilates the competition every year?
That is where Greta Weitz is, in Marcus Garvey Park in Upper Manhattan. And there's another look now at Poli. He is running south on the Park Drive, approaching the Plaza of the Nations area at 59th Street and 5th Avenue, where for a moment or two, or rather for a couple of minutes, he will exit the park and run along 59th Street, which New Yorkers call Central Park South. Then at Columbus Circle, where the statue of Christopher Columbus is, he turns to his right, back up into the park, and from there, it's a short sprint to the finish line at Tavern on the Green. The crowd, as you can see, lined up and cheering Poli along the way. Most of them have been reading newspaper articles that focused before the race on Pizzolato and Di Castella and Jama, and most of them probably don't know who Johnny Poli is as they watch him go by.
No, 13th in last August European Championships. Before that, you know, in 1982, he was 13th. So he is quite a surprise. The first American is Pete Fitzinger, about 3 minutes back.
What about the status of American men's marathon running? Some say that because of the money in road racing, because of the number of 10-kilometer races that American road racers enter, there is not going to be, just as there hasn't been for the past few years, a top American male on the world list in marathon running.
Well, I think we're seeing the lull before the storm. I think a couple of things happened. Having the Olympics in this country has gotten our best runners, the 5,000 and 10,000 meter runners, to realize how important the Olympic marathon is. So we have about 5 men. Last year, the #1 10,000 meter runner in the world was Bruce Bickford, an American. This year, it will be Mark Nino, an American. In 2 years, they will move up to the marathon distance, and we will probably have an Olympic medal. But right now, we're staying away from the marathon, as did the first 2 finishers in the last Olympics. They stayed away from it in the 2 years before.
There's a bold prediction. Quote, Marty McCrory says that the United States will probably have an Olympic medal in the marathon at Seoul, South Korea in 1988. I'm going to remember that one, Marty. Meanwhile, Johnny Poli aims toward a possible New York City Marathon Championship. We'll be back right after this. All right, we're going to try to establish a perspective now on how far Rob Di Castella is behind Johnny Poli. As we try this little experiment with race coverage, you're going to see our men's lead vehicle camera move past Di Castella and drive forward now through the park. You can see it is a rather forbidding distance, certainly in the mind of Di Castella, all the way up to where Johnny Poli is. Still haven't reached it. Moving rapidly, and that does something to the transmission, as you can see. And that's quite a distance. Marty LaCory, I'd say Di Castella is certainly up against it at this point.
That's right, and Pizzolato is now in 5th, so somewhere in Central Park, a fat lady is singing.
Now, I suggested earlier, and without trying to get ugly about this topic, it must be covered, that a victory by Poli would arouse further suspicion of blood doping. Do you think people are going to bring that question up?
Oh, I think the top runners are certainly going to bring it up, that a guy who never really was in the top 10 in any major marathon shows up in New York and wins. But it's the same question we've been wrestling with since 1972. Juha Vaatsanen, Finnish runner, winning the 10,000 in the Europeans. Lassi Viren never doing well outside of the Olympics. So we've been wrestling with it in the past 5 years, the research, and older athletes out of conscience or whatever have admitted doing it. So it's always a question, and it's a thing that's tough for our sport because it's undetectable, and there's probably 50% of the runners in the world who would say it's morally fine. It's no worse than taking vitamins. You take a pint of blood out 8 weeks before the race, and you put it in 3 days before, and you run about 2 or 3% better than you would have without it.
Do you believe you're educated enough on the subject to make a personal guess as to whether the top Italian runners engage in blood doping?
I say the top Italian runners, the top Finnish runners. A lot of countries do. I know they do.
Well,
and the top American cyclists have admitted to it. I don't know about the top American runners, but we shouldn't make the fact that it's any country other than America. We're certainly the equal in scientific knowledge of distance running.
And of course, we want to leave open the possibility, broad as it is, that this may simply be an outstanding performance by a runner whose nation is producing a legion of good distance runners now, led by the great Alberto Cova, world record holder in the 10,000 meters.
It goes in cycles. There are 1,000 people from Italy who came here just to watch Pizzolato win. So you can imagine the kind of encouragement that all the Italian runners are getting at this point.
They're going to get an unexpected treat, aren't they, Larry Rawson?
Jim, they certainly are. And if Poli loses this race, it'll be a bigger surprise than the Red Sox losing the 6th game to the Mets. He has about 200 yards right now or more on Di Castella. Third and fourth is still measurably behind the Deke, but he looks terrific. He is up with the balls of his feet. He looks like he would have difficulty splitting the skin of a grape. He looks so light on his feet, and he has less than a mile to go. He's looking around at the crowd. I'm telling you, most of the time they're focused on the ground at this point of the race, but not Poli. He does keep looking behind, though. I'm surprised that he lacks the confidence to feel that Di Castella seemingly is so totally out of it right now. But this is the third Italian victory, it looks like, in 3 years, Jim.
Well, he has just gone through the Grand Army Plaza at the corner of 59th Street and the bottom corner, I should call that the southeast corner of Central Park. He is running along the street we call Central Park South now, a little bit like a tourist as he gazes up at the big hotels to his left and basks in the attention of the beautiful trees and the large crowd in Central Park to his right. In moments, he will turn past the statue of Christopher Columbus at Columbus Circle, where the finish line was for the 1896 American Marathon just 90 years ago, and he will turn back up the Park Drive toward Tavern on the Green and the finish line in the New York City Marathon. At this point, it would be a major and dramatic surprise if anyone wins this race other than Johnny Poli of Italy, who has dominated it ever since making his break up in the South Bronx just after leaving Manhattan.
Well, he decimated the field, and he really hurt Rob Di Castella, who's now given up second place to Ryszard Niemczak from Poland, right there in second place. He's one of the men who laid off the pace for the first 15 miles and is now moving up. He's 30 years old from Poland, and he has run a fast time on the track for 10,000 meters and run 2:10:34 for the marathon. But to put this into perspective, the Italians have now won first and second with a different runner in the European Marathon Championships this summer. They won the first 3 places in the 10,000 meters, and now they have won the New York Marathon for the 3rd time. Certainly, they are the Finns. The Finnish athletes did this in the 70s. They're doing it in the 80s.
Curious irony, isn't it, that he's going to collect a German car for winning this race? Of course, the Italians make fine automobiles themselves. Johnny Poli of Italy. That is still Central Park South. You can see the crowd cheering him on. New York, of course, a city rife with people of Italian heritage and Italian background. A lot of people who will be rooting for him just as soon as they hear his last name. And he turns right past that statue of Columbus I've mentioned before and into the park. The home stretch. Tavern on the Green, not yet within his sight, but certainly within the realm of his senses. He knows what's coming up. Almost almost smiling now.
He's pretty smart. He gets about 100 yards around the turn, and he looks back because he knows he's gone 100 yards, and he's looking for somebody to come around that corner within 100 yards. He's been doing that at every sharp turn for the last 10 miles, so he knows exactly what he's doing. Kind of reminiscent of Frank Shorter. His body style and his style of running.
He is largely reminiscent of Shorter. Thin, willowy like Shorter, taller certainly. Height and weight listed here. It'd be interesting to know if he's as tall as Rod Dixon, who was maybe the tallest man ever to win this race.
I doubt if he's as tall as Rod. But I think about 12 o'clock tonight, he and Rod will both be about equally as high.
Well, he's going to have to drink a lot of beer to keep up with Rod, whose New Zealand heritage gives him a major advantage in that regard. 2:10:09. You see how much they slowed down since the blistering first half of the race, and that was a story in and of itself. That first 10 miles was a much faster pace than perhaps most of the runners should have committed themselves to.
The fast pace in the beginning really ruined, in a sense, the race for many of the athletes who were going to finish from 5th place to 10th place, because it was an all-or-nothing thing. If you went for that pace, you took the chance of running extremely well or getting nothing. The men who paced themselves, like Nemzak, came up and got second, but many of the runners, all of the African runners, really crashed in the middle of the race.
The championship of this marathon is in Italian hands. Unofficially, 2 hours, 11 minutes, and 6 seconds. It's what we've come to call in New York a very Pizzolato-like time. And there is Anton Nimczak of Poland, 30 years old, who has just finished second behind Poland. Foley of Italy first, Nimczak of Poland second. Well, for a moment there, he looked drained and spent. Now he's starting to get some expression back in his face. This is the first major marathon victory for that young man. And now, Pizzolato in 3rd place, waving to the crowd. Di Castella has dropped way back. Pizzolato waves to a crowd which loves him as he comes across the finish line in 3rd. Italians, 1st and 3rd.
You have to congratulate him because he made that big move early. He was hurting very much at mile 15, but he stayed in there and plugged away and came back up to get 3rd place in a fairly good time.
So in finishing 3rd, Pizzolato has proven something about himself once again.
I think he may get more respect from the marathoning community for this performance than his previous 2 in New York. This comes on top of the 2nd place in the European Championships.
He underlines his status as a major star, but he was 3rd. He'll be back with the winner after this. And there's a look at Greta Weitz as she heads toward an apparent 8th New York City Marathon victory, not threatened by Lara Fogli of Italy or any other runner since about the 15-mile mark. Very quickly, a major correction on my part. Unfortunately, I am now told by my spotting system that I was incorrect in saying that Pizzolato had finished 3rd. Our camera missed Rob Di Castella in some way, shape, or form, while Di Castella apparently crossed the line in 3rd place. So that answers the mystery of where was Rob Di Castella. He did get in 3rd place. Pizzolato was 4th, and that does nothing, I think, to detract from Pizzolato's accomplishment. It remains, just as you said, Marty LaCourie, another major statement about his particular talent. Now, with that done, let's now go to Larry Rawson with the most important man in the moment, Johnny Poli of Italy, the winner. Larry?
Thank you, Jim. I'm here with his interpreter, Mr. Poletti. Mr. Poletti, could you ask him, he looked fresh the entire way. Did he have any problems out there?
Hai avuto alcuni problemi durante la corsa? Tu guardi molto fresco.
Ho corso molto bene fino al 30° chilometro.
I running very well into the territorium kilometer? Yes.
After I had a little problem with the leg, but I finished in good condition. It's my first time that I win race how marathon, New York Marathon. It's very important for me. I win only 2 marathons. This is the second marathon, but it's a wonderful race. It's the best of the world race.
Gianni, tell me, at what point did you feel that you had beaten Rob Di Castello?
A quale punto della maratona tu pensavi di aver battuto Mr. Rob De Castella?
Ho pensato di aver battuto De Castella quando sono arrivato al 35esimo chilometro.
At the 35 miles, I was quite...
35 kilometers.
Kilometer, I'm sorry, 35 kilometers.
That's 18 and a half miles. Go ahead.
At the 18 and a half miles, I was quite sure to beat Mr. Rob De Castella.
Talk to me, if you can, in English. What about the crowds? Did they help you?
Parla se puoi tu in inglese.
It's very difficult for me to speak English because I speak only little. The people is wonderful. I ran in all the world, but this is the most important marathon in the world. The people is fantastic, wonderful.
Deke, let me ask you if I could for a second. You looked great to me, like at 18 miles, and then what happened?
I don't know. I just started to, find it pretty tough out there. There's nothing that I can put it down to. I just started to get tired. I had a bit of trouble. Had a bit of trouble around about 18, 19 miles with a little bit of a cramp, and Gianni really broke away from me at that stage. And I just never really got back into a good rhythm, and I just started to struggle a little bit.
Now, you held on.
The pace was just faster than it was.
You held on well, I would say, right up to 23 miles. Were you hoping that your strength might catch him in the park, on the hills?
I was just hoping to keep on going, and I was just trying to maintain my form and concentrate on running as smoothly and trying to finish on as strongly. I wasn't finishing on strongly. I was really just trying to slow down as little as I could. But I was really hurting those last few miles.
Thanks. We wish you luck. It was great having you here in New York.
Well, I don't think luck's got much to do with it.
Jim, that's the story here at the finish line. Orlando Pizzolato coming in well, finishing 4th, I believe, in the race. And our winner, another Italian for the 3rd year in a row.
And poetically, Larry, as you look at the final standings, the split times, which Rob Di Castella had written onto the back of his left hand, had smudged into a sort of gray blur. 3rd place is not to be discredited as a finish in the New York Marathon, but it isn't what Rob Di Castella was here to do. There is Greta Weitz, who is doing exactly what she wants to do, headed toward her 8th victory in 9 entries into the New York City Marathon. She's never finished this race without winning it. Her only loss came in 1981 when she was forced out with injury on a day on which Allison Rowe ran what was up to then the fastest marathon time ever recorded by a woman in the sport. And Greta Weitz gets counseling from her husband, Jack Weitz, as she makes her way toward the finish.
The 1986 New York City Marathon. This ABC Sports exclusive is being brought to you by Mercedes-Benz, automotive sponsor of the New York City Marathon. By Planters, the peanuts with fresh roasted taste. By General Electric. At GE, we bring good things to life. And by Michelob, so exceptionally smooth, the night belongs to Michelob.
Another look at Greta Weitz of Norway, who has just passed the 25-mile mark on her way to about a 2-hour, 27-minute tour of the New York Marathon course, which she knows so well. Not one of her faster times here, not one of her slower ones either. A characteristic victory in the New York City Marathon upcoming for Greta Weitz. We'll be watching her finish. We'll be watching her finish very shortly. But first, Marty Liquori, your final capsule impression of what happened in the men's race won by Gianni Poli of Italy.
Well, I think in retrospect, it's a classic case of the Italians 3 and 4 years ago not even being a factor in the New York Marathon or in any marathon in the world, and Gianni Poli seeing Orlando Pizzolato do it on kind of a fluky day, but that just raised within him the possibility that if that fellow can do it, that I've been running with all these years, that I ran against in college and club meets, I can do it. And that's what happened. He got the confidence, and when the time came for him to strike out on his own, for him to take the lead, not let Di Castello lead, not defer to Orlando Pizzolato, he did it. He did it with a relish on First Avenue, and he put the race away.
And again, the overall story, those are not the only two Italian marathon runners of impact.
Another separate man won the European Championships by just a few seconds over Pizzolato. So they've got a lot to debate. It's like us with the Red Sox and the Mets. Is Pizzolato the better man because he was second in the Europeans and fourth here? Or is Johnny Polo better because he has the Italian record and he won New York this year? I wish we had those debates about the Americans. Our top American was Pete Fitzinger. He finished 9th today.
Give me a quick answer as we look at Greta again. Is De Castella still #1?
He'll be #1 for this year.
All right, Greta Weitz is making her way now, as you can see, through the familiar environs of Central Park, following the footsteps of Poli and Nimchak and De Castella and Pizzolato and all the men who have finished before her.
She's going to finish in just outside of 2 minutes, 27 seconds. And let us repeat that people have said that, well, it's not too interesting when Greta wins because Greta always wins, but she is so competitive. She gets the competition early, and today she got them on the hills. First, it was Lisa Martin who dropped back, and then Lara Foley on the bridge. And here she is, the soul of consistency, the quintessential Greta Weitz, running her own race. As you said, it wasn't her best, it wasn't her worst. It was right in the middle of the 8 performances.
Greta fairly bristles at discussions of time. Someone asked her this week if she's interested in running under 2 hours, 20 minutes, something that both Ingrid Christensen and Joan Benoit, her peers in the sport, have said they'd like to do. And she basically discounted it as a goal.
Let me interrupt you, Jim. There is Lisa Martin, and this was a great race for second place. Lisa caught up to Lara Foley at about 22 miles, passed her, and now is coming into second. You can see from the back view there that she is working at it and is laboring. But here is Greta with no problems at all. You're right about that 220 barrier. She feels that maybe the women are running themselves into the ground worrying about it. She said, I stay at peace and I run for a long time because I don't worry about time. I'm a competitor. We sure saw that today.
She also said that she seriously doubts whether she will ever again appear in the same race with Joan Benoit Samuelson and Ingrid Christensen. It only happened once at the Olympic Games in Los Angeles in 1984. A lot of us thought that Greta might have been disappointed with her silver medal there. She said absolutely not. She was quite happy to win silver on that day.
And you must remember, though, that with the exception of Joan Benoit, Greta has beaten a who's who of women's running, including Catalano, Brown, Muller, and Christensen herself in New York and elsewhere. And so when she says she doesn't plan on meeting them again, that, she says, is a difference in schedules, not really planning. That Christensen, for instance, still wants to stay on the track. Greta says one reason why I can stay and keep my life as an athlete and keep injury-free relatively is to stay off the track, keep away from that speed work. So she says, I'm going to let Ingrid chase those medals and those victories and those championships. I'm going to go for the wins.
Indeed, Ingrid has said that even though she has beaten Weitz, she still holds a slight measure of awe for her. And though she's run faster times, she has a certain Greta complex which will never entirely be eliminated from her psyche. Now, you brought us back to point one. This is perhaps significant mostly to Greta as the race in which she proved to herself that the injuries she suffered this summer didn't really hamper her.
Well, let me say this, that Joni Benoit has taught all of us Americans that sometimes you take off with a bit of time from an injury and it rests you. Greta said to me, maybe my rest from the European Championships in August has made me more ready for New York, and I think that is certainly the case.
And I used the word once before, I'll return to it again. Inscrutable. She does not look largely different now than she looked in the first 4 miles of the race.
She keeps calm and keeps serene. She just concentrates. She is a very, very great competitor and simply concentrates on the task at hand. Obviously, she knew those two women were with her, but she just wasn't going to get rattled.
Is it too much of a generalization to say that it is a Scandinavian quality?
Probably is, but anyway, it's a nice look, and Norwegians are known to be cold in cold weather or cool, and they don't get ruffled. Certainly, if that's the image, Greta lives up to it.
One of the parts of the public relations job that she's now involved in promoting herself as one of the world's 3 best women marathoners is a post she has now taken in helping to promote tourism in Norway. She says that that is not an easy thing for her to do, but that she loves the country of Norway, where she was born and has lived all of her life, and she would like for other people to appreciate it more as she does. And now let's just bask for a moment in the crowd's response to Greta's victory. Norway. Victory number 8.
And she's smiling now, Jim, as well as she should. This appears to be really one of her easier runs. She doesn't seem to be distressed. I have never quite seen her so relaxed and waving to the crowd as she came into the finish.
She's 33 years old. She doesn't know how much longer she is going to be doing this, but certainly she does not appear to be slowing down or showing signs of wear and tear in any way whatsoever.
Jim, let's say this, she's still improving. And here's second place, Lisa Martin. Oh, she's working at it, but it's a good second place for her. She's certainly looking toward that finish line.
And certainly the disappointment of losing to Greta will be somewhat ameliorated by the fact that she dropped the third and then came back and got Lara Foley.
That's right. That was a very, very good competition, and certainly one Lara ran the race of her career. But Lisa, catching her mid-race and coming back and showing how competitive she really is. Lisa Martin is a very, very tenacious and unafraid competitor. And I think if anybody is going to be Greta, it's going to be this lady right here. Lisa is now going to wait around and wait for her father to finish. Her father from Australia is running in the race with her.
So is Rob DiCostella's father, Rolette DiCostella. Family affair, New York City Marathon. We'll be back with Greta Weitz.
How many people, when they win a major race, you say to them, which was a sweeter victory, the first or the second time? For you, I have to say, was it the first? Was it the 7th? Was it the 3rd? Or was it the 8th? It was a lot of pressure coming in this year, wasn't there?
Yes, I feel that every time I know we're in New York, the pressure is getting bigger and bigger. Everybody takes it more or less for granted that I shall win. And I had to explain to people that the race is tough and the competition this year was very good with Lisa Martin, Lara Foley.
Were you surprised by Lara Foley? I mean, she has never stuck that close for so long.
No, and I heard also that she had some problems with her foot or leg, so I was very surprised that she was running with us for so long.
I was just curious, the crowd, you never do look around until the very last 10 yards, but when you come by, they get so excited, they throw flowers, they're so appreciative of you. You're truly a celebrity here. Do you feel it? Does it help you?
Yes, it really helps, and that is what makes the New York City Marathon very special to me. The crowds along the course, they are so supportive, and it's very nice for a Norwegian to experience that.
I suppose it's not fair to ask, so close to the end, you've just done it the 8th time. It's a fantastic accomplishment. Will we see number 9 from Greta Weitz?
I don't know. If I had to tell you how I feel right now, I would say this is the last, but you never know. I said that after last year too, so maybe I'll come back.
On behalf of all of New York, hearty congratulations, Greta. Let's get a quick word with Lisa Martin. Lisa, congratulations to you also. Tell me what happened on the Pulaski Bridge. It just very quickly dropped 25 yards or so behind on the hill there.
I felt uncomfortable at the start, and I felt really bad at halfway, and it was odd. I was, hanging on for 3rd place, and then when we got off the Queensboro Bridge and got onto 1st Avenue, I felt really good, and I started running 5:30 mile pace. So the last 10K was by far my best, and I really bowled in home, and I knew I was gaining all the time, but I just left it far too late. I have no idea why I felt so bad at the beginning. It's just the way it went.
Do you think it has anything to do with the fact that this whole week, maybe even 2 weeks, the whole town has been saying it's no longer a one-woman race. There's somebody else out here of quality. It's going to be a two-horse race. Did you feel that in the beginning, maybe?
That should have helped me. The pace that we were running was about the same that I ran in Scotland when I ran a 2:26 marathon. So it should have felt comfortable, but it just felt so different from when I was running in Scotland. It felt uncomfortable, my legs felt achy. And, that's the scary thing about the marathon. You can do everything right in preparation, and you're not sure what will happen on the day. So I'm just pleased that I hung in there, and I think I was about 15 seconds closer to her this year than last year, which means I have to do this 4 more times before I beat her.
Well, let's face it, 1986 has brought you into the best of the world.
I've had a good year, and I'm ready for a holiday. She's just an awfully good runner.
You are too. Congratulations, Lisa.
All right, thank you very much, Diana. And we'll be back to wrap this up very shortly. I'd be remiss, incidentally, if I didn't take a moment to thank our 2 researchers, Barry Brown and Roger Robinson, in the studio, and our medical expert, Dr. Paul Thompson. What you've seen in the last 3 hours represents only the beginning and a small part of the finish of the New York City Marathon. By now, only a tiny percentage of the 20,000 who left the Verrazano Narrows Bridge this morning have crossed the finish line. In fact, there's a much larger number of runners who have not yet gotten out of Queens and into Manhattan. This day belongs partially to the big stars, but mostly to them. Now, thanks for being with us.
The New York City Marathon is conducted under the auspices of the New York Roadrunners Club, President Fred LeBeau and Vice President Alan Steinfeld, with the cooperation of the City of New York, particularly the New York City Police Department. This ABC Sports exclusive has been brought to you by Mercedes-Benz, automotive sponsor of the New York City Marathon, by Better Cheddar's Snack Bins, another fine Nabisco product, by Michelob, so exceptionally smooth, the night belongs to Michelob, and by The Equitable, your key to financial opportunity. Coming up next over most of these ABC stations this week with David Brinkley. Travel arrangements made through and a promotional fee paid by United Airlines. United flies more people to Hawaii than any other airline. Nobody knows Hawaii like United. This has been a presentation of ABC Sports, recognized around the world as the leader in sports television.